I'd like to welcome everyone. And again, the format is going to be that in general, for the first half hour, I'll be speaking. And after that, we'll take questions and comments if there are any. Now, what I would like to do after our previous class, the first class of this series, was pretty much an introduction. I would like for today and for the next couple of times, as long as it takes us, to actually study the laws in the Rambam, in Maimonides. And the reason for that is as follows. This is my thinking. It's very good, it's very nice that there are available in various different languages, in English as well, books with the laws for the Bnei Noach, or the non-Jews, of the regulations and of the rules and of the laws and the do's and the don'ts for the Bnei Noach. And some of those books are good, and some of them are even better. However, the source, for the most part, is the Rambam Maimonides. Now, where does he get it from? So he gets it from the Talmud. But in the Talmud, it's not written in a fashion of practical law. There, it's the whole discussion and all the opinions, which may be fascinating and very interesting, especially to a scholar or someone who's an academic. But for practical application, for that we have the Rambam, just as the Jews, in addition to the Rambam, Maimonides, we have what came much later, the Shulchan Aruch, the Jewish Code of Law. Now, as we discussed last time, in the Jewish Code of Law, you don't have the laws of Sheva Mitzvos Bnei Noach because the Jewish Code of Law was written for the Jews. And at that time, some 500 years ago, when it was written, the Jews were unable to promote and teach the Noahide commandments to their Noahide neighbors. So therefore, it was, at that time, irrelevant on a practical level for a Jew to know the Noahide commandments. However, Maimonides, the Rambam, he wrote his amazing magnum opus of Jewish law, covering every single commandment, every single subject and topic in Jewish law. And as we discussed last time, it's found in the laws of kings. Now, very briefly, why would you think it's in the laws of kings? So basically, this is how it works. First of all, the laws of kings are the last laws of Maimonides out of his 14 books, which are all divided into different subjects of Jewish law. And altogether, there's 83 laws, 83 subjects. So the 83rd of the 83 is the laws of kings, how a Jewish monarchy works, the government of a Jewish monarchy, the way it's supposed to be. So the first chapters is explaining to us all the rules of a Jewish king, what he must do, what he mustn't do, and how his government works. And you have the wars. Actually, in many of the editions, the full name is called the Laws of Kings and Wars, or Kings and Their Wars. So then we get into this situation of the Eshes Yefas Toyar, the case where a Jewish soldier at war sees a non-Jewish woman or girl and desires her. So he basically takes her home with him, but not as a regular captive to be a slave. but he would like her to become his wife. So a lot of details, which the Rambam discusses here in the Laws of Kings, of how that's to be done in such a case. And we give her the opportunity to convert, to become Jewish. And if not, well, actually, she has a choice and he has a choice. At the end, if it doesn't work out, he is to send her home, back to her country where we had a war with them, and set her free and let her go back to her parents' home. Now, as part of that whole ordeal, so in order for it to work, she has to formally denounce idolatry and accept that. And then that's how the Rambam leads into the whole idea of the Bnei Noach commandments. And so then that would be the very end of chapter 8. And then chapter 9 and 10. Those two chapters are completely devoted to Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, the 7 Noahide commandments. Some of you may be very familiar with them from the Rambam. Some of you may have studied them in English, a translation. And again, if you're reading or studying any of these books that are available about the Noahide commandments, it's pretty much the Rambam plus a lot. But I think it's important to go back to the basics, go back to the source, I should say. And although the ultimate source, as we discussed last time, is the written law, the Bible, the Torah, the Chumash, and then the Talmud, but we're going to go to the source as far as practical application applies. Now, there are some opinions which disagree with certain details of the Rambam, but I think it's safe and fair to say that for the most part, the authority and the one that we follow is indeed the Rambam. And for the sake of accuracy, personally, my personal preference is to read it inside and to translate. So for those of you that don't yet know the Holy Tongue, referred to as Hebrew, which it seems like in the Messianic era, all of the nations will indeed be speaking, understand, communicate, whatever, in the Holy Tongue, based on the verse in the prophet Zephaniah, that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, where it says over there that all the nations will have a clear tongue and they will all be communicating basically in the original Holy Tongue. So therefore, it's nice if we can actually read it. And for those that understand it in the original, that's great. For those that don't, I will, with the help of God, do my best to give you a translation, hopefully somewhat accurate. And that's why, parenthetically, I don't see any problem, and I even think it would be commendable that Bnei Noach nowadays learn Hebrew. I don't think there's a problem with that at all. That's my understanding, that's my opinion. Although a Ben Noach, Noachide, is forbidden to study or be involved in learning Torah unless it is directly related to the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach. I don't think that that would include studying the language of Lashon HaKodesh, of the Holy Tongue, because as we mentioned, that is what everybody is going to be speaking, and we are currently in the beginning of the Messianic era, so whatever we're doing in that direction, I think is proper and appropriate. So again, we're in chapter 8 of the Laws of Kings, and it's broken up into what we call small halachas, which would be paragraphs, or subsection. So chapter 8, law or halacha 10. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher, did not give over as an inheritance the divine law, the Torah, and the commandments to anyone other than to Yisrael, just to the Jewish people, the Jewish nation. Shenemar, and the proof text to that is a verse in the Torah, towards the end of the 5 books of Moses, in the book of Devarim, Moirasha Kehilas Yaakov. That would be in chapter 33, like really right towards the end. It says over there that the Torah that was commanded to us through Moses is an inheritance to the congregation of Jacob. That's otherwise known as the Jewish people. So it says clearly, Moirasha, an inheritance, Kehilas Yaakov, for the Jewish community, the Jewish congregation. And in addition to that, to anyone who wants to convert from the rest of the nations. So there is that opportunity in the Jewish law, the God-given Jewish religion. There is the opportunity for anyone who wants to convert to Judaism. Shenemar, as the verse states, Kachem Kager. Right, that's a different verse in the Chumash, in the book of Bamidbar, Numbers, chapter 15, where it says, like you, like the convert. So from there we learn out that anything that applies to a regular born Jew applies equally to the convert. So there is a concept of a convert. And there it's obviously not talking about a Ger Toshav. See, oftentimes, biblically, when he uses the word Ger, the sojourner, the resident, the visitor, the alien, however you want to properly translate it based on context. So the word Ger sometimes is talking about the Ger Toshav, which is a whole discussion for itself, which I think we just touched upon last time, and we're not going to get into it this time, but we will eventually speak about that more at length. And a Ger Toshav is not Jewish. And a Ger Toshav keeps the 7. But then we have the term Ger, which in this verse, according to the oral tradition, is clearly referring to what's known in rabbinic literature as Ger Tzedek, which literally means the righteous Ger or convert. In other words, the word Ger could be ambiguous. So we have 2 types of Ger. Biblically, the regular Ger and Ger Toshav. And in rabbinic language, Ger Tzedek, or just plain Ger, and Ger Toshav. Now, here is not the place where the Rambam is discussing laws of conversion. That is in a different one of the 14 books. That's actually in the laws of forbidden marital relations. Since a Jew is not allowed to marry a non-Jew, either way, a Jewish man is forbidden from marrying a non-Jewish woman, and a Jewish woman is forbidden to marry a non-Jewish man. So in that way, Maimonides goes into the discussion of conversion. How, by Jewish law, one is to convert to become Jewish. So that's where he goes into all those details. Here he's not going into that. So we have the concept of a ger, of a convert. A male would be ger, and a woman, the female would be giyoyres. Now, once a person converts, and there's only one way to convert, and that is according to Jewish law. And a whole discussion, which I do think we should have, but again, not today, is the travesty of the fake, phony conversions that are going on nowadays. So it's very important that anyone who wants to convert to Judaism, or anyone who knows anyone who is sincerely and truly going through conversion, it has to be done properly. So if someone does go through proper conversion, once they've completed the process they are 100% Jewish, as if they were born from a Jewish mother. And that we learn from this verse, these two words, kachem, kager, like you, like convert. There's basically no difference. A couple of technical, so to say, minor points, but basically no difference. And if anything, they have more rights than a born Jew. They're basically in the category of the people that need to be taken care of, and you need to have extra compassion, which would oftentimes the Torah bunches together the widow, the orphan, the poor, and the convert. All right? So we have to treat the convert with extra special love and compassion. So a convert is not really a second-class citizen. Again, for the sake of being frank, which if you haven't picked up yet, in general, I try to be open, honest, and frank. That doesn't mean that I always say everything, but at least what I say, I believe to be true, and I want to be frank. I don't want to offend anyone, but I want to be straightforward and frank, and I think that if you're joining us, you would appreciate that. So there are certain cases where the convert is a second-class citizen, in all honesty. Those are very few, and those are certain technicalities. Otherwise, the convert is just as Jewish and on the same level as a born Jew. And as I mentioned, if anything, they get precedence when it comes to many, many issues. All right, so the Torah and the mitzvahs, the commandments, the 613, are only for someone of the Jewish faith, whether they were born in Jew or whether they converted from the other nations. Aval misha lo yiratza. But an individual, a non-Jew, who didn't want to accept this and become Jewish, ein koifino yisoy lekabel Torah mitzvahs, is not forced or compelled to accept Torah and mitzvahs. In Judaism, we do not proselytize in the sense of trying to recruit converts. By no means. As a matter of fact, going back to those laws where Maimonides discusses how conversion works, at first, we dissuade the individual who claims to want to convert. So we are not looking for converts, and we don't recruit converts. It's an option that if someone sincerely wants to, there's a process to go through, and then once we got to that point, we accept and take them in with open arms. But at first, we do show resistance. And here's where, at this point, the Rambam now is moving on from the Jew to the non-Jew. So the non-Jew could become Jewish, but if they don't want to, there's no compelling anything to make a non-Jew Jewish. And likewise, Tiva Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, has commanded, Mipi Agvura, from God Almighty, La Chayf, to force or compel. Eskol Ba'e Ha'olam, all of the inhabitants of the world, all of the human beings on the face of the earth. It's a very general and a very clear and a very strong language. Kol Ba'e Ha'olam means all people of the world, everybody. L'kabel, to accept. Mitzvos, commandments, shnitztavu Bnei Noach, that the descendants of Noah were commanded. So the Jewish people were commanded by God through Moses to get everybody on the planet, no matter what nationality, doesn't make a difference. Everybody is to accept the 7 Noahide commandments. So in that regard, we are supposed to proselytize, if that's the right word to use. I'm not sure that would fall into the category of the translation of the word proselytize. But if it means to push religion, then yes, we Jews are supposed to do that, but not in the conventional sense of trying to get people or convince people to join our religion. No, by no means. Jews are not supposed to try to get other people to become Jewish. We are mandated to get everybody to accept the 7 Noahide commandments. Last week we kind of just brushed over it, but now we're learning it inside. Anyone who will not accept them shall be put to death, shall be killed. And one who does accept them, that individual is called a Ger Toshav everywhere. You know, whenever we speak about that in any of the laws, and we say Ger Toshav means a Noahide, a non-Jew, who accepted upon themselves to keep and adhere to these laws. And this individual is required, he needs to accept them upon himself in the presence of 3, I don't want to say scholarly, 3 religious Jews. In the presence of 3 observant, trustworthy Jews. Now, anyone who took upon themselves to become circumcised, and 12 months have passed from the time that they accepted upon themselves to be circumcised, and they did not go through with it. So then this person is like any other non-Jew. Now, first of all, there are different versions to what actually should be here in the Rambam. There are different manuscripts, and there were different prints going back to when it was first printed hundreds of years ago. So there are different opinions as to what it should really say here. And basically, what we're saying here is that a Ger Toshav is not just a non-Jew who's keeping the laws. That's required of everybody. A Ger Toshav is more formal and actually is going through somewhat of I want to be careful with the word conversion, because there's no such thing really as being partially Jewish in the sense of the way we're explaining it. It's really pretty black and white. So the Ger Toshav is going through somewhat of a process. He formally is accepting it, and the male Ger Toshav seemingly would need to be circumcised as well. And the Ger Toshav is residing in the land of Israel, and the Rambam says a number of times that Ger Toshav only applies when we have the Jubilee year in effect. So he then has 12 months to circumcise himself, which seems to imply clearly that the Ger Toshav does have to go through circumcision, which is part of the process to become a Ger Tzedek. And yet the Ger Toshav, seemingly it's not enough that he's keeping the 7, but he also would have to do that. But if he doesn't go through with it, then he's no worse than a regular non-Jew. He did not make it to the status of Ger Toshav. it's almost like he had a 12-month, I don't know if it's the grace period, but a 12-month testing period, if you will. He accepted it formally, very nice. And it's not easy, especially for an adult, to go through circumcision. He has 12 months to do it. If he didn't, then he sort of loses that status of Ger Toshav when it applied, and is back to just being a regular non-Jew who still needs to keep the 7. And it still would be the job of the Jewish person to see to it that he keeps the 7. All right. Now, let's do the last law in this chapter, and then we'll open up for questions and discussion. Kol HaMekabel Sheva Mitzvahs. This is chapter 9, law 11. Anyone who accepts upon themselves Sheva Mitzvahs, the 7 commandments, v'nizhar la'asosam, and is careful to do them. They took it upon themselves and they're careful to keep them. Harezeh, behold, this one is mechasidei umois ha'olam. They have a new category now. We have a title for that person. Not a Ger Toshav necessarily. So what are they? Chasidei umois ha'olam. From the pious of the nations of the world. A chassid is basically, the root of the word is kind, and basically it's someone who goes above and beyond the letter of the law. So it's a certain title that we use for Jews oftentimes, for certain types of Jews, or as you know, for the past about 300 years, there's Hasidim. Those are Hasidic Jews. Those are Jews that basically follow in the ways of the great Rebbe Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, who lived about 300 years ago, and started the Hasidic movement and revealed Hasidus to the world, which we can have an entire class or more about that. And then it branched off into many, many groups, and Hasidic Jews are called Hasidim. So we also have this term for the non-Jews, the righteous of the Gentiles, the pious of the nations of the world. And that individual, that Ben Noach, has a share in the world to come, in the afterlife. Vehu. However, this is the qualification. What we just said is only that the individual, the Noahide, will accept them upon himself and observe them, keep them, mipnei shetziva bohen HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'Torah. Because this has to be his motive and this has to be his philosophy. He's keeping them because he was commanded by the Holy One, blessed be he, in the Torah. V'hidi anu, and we were informed of these 7 al yidei Moshe Rabbeinu, through Moses, our teacher, that the Noachites beforehand, even before the Torah was given, were commanded to keep them. So in order to have this title of Chasidei Umayis Ha'olam, and therefore merit the world to come, the individual has to keep them because they are divine, God-given, through Moses in the Torah. But if this individual kept these laws because logically they make sense, they're rational laws, one by one, every one of them makes sense, unlike many of the Jewish commandments and rituals that the Jew has to keep, which are completely beyond understanding, many of them. These 7 are all logical. So if the guy is keeping them because they make sense, ein ze Ger Toshav, so this person cannot be a Ger Toshav. He's not a Ger Toshav. And likewise, he's not from the Chasidei Umayis Ha'olam, from the pious or the righteous of the nations of the world. And then we have over here the last 2 words, a crucial difference between different versions in the printed word of the Rambam. V'loi meichachameihem. And he's not from the wise of the Gentiles. Not only is he not a Ger Toshav, and he's not from the pious, from the religious of the nations of the world, he's not from the wise of the nations of the world. And the other version is, instead of the word veloy, which means not, it's Ella rather. In other words, if a non-Jew is strictly observing and keeping the Noahide laws because logically they make sense, then according to this version, he is not from the righteous or the pious of the nations. Rather, he's from the wise of the nations. Big difference. All right. So that really is like the segue into going into all the details, which is going to be the next two chapters, chapter 9 and 10. And at this point, I would like to open up the floor for anyone, anything, and go ahead. Not all at once now.
I have a question then.
Sure.
When the Ger Tzedek, this acceptance must be made in the presence of 3 Torah scholars, and you mentioned in the Jubilee year, and somewhere along the line, I remember somebody saying that that there also had to be the Sanhedrin. Is that the Torah scholars that you're talking about?
Did you mean a Ger Toshav, because you said Ger Tzedek?
Ger Tzedek.
Ger Tzedek is the term.
An alien?
No, that's Ger Toshav.
Oh, Ger Tzedek is the convert. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Ger
Toshav. Ger Toshav, according to Maimonides, in at least 4 different places here in this work of his, does not apply, unless you have the Jubilee year in effect. And in order to have the Jubilee year in effect, you have to have all of the Jewish people residing in the Holy Land of Israel.
So that's all part of the Sanhedrin thing?
No, you don't. Well, good point. First of all, when he said the 3 Chaverim, the 3 how did we translate? The 3 religious, trustworthy Jews, they do not by any means have to be members of the Sanhedrin, of the court. And having a Sanhedrin is not directly a condition for the Ger Toshav. It might be in the sense that when you don't have the Jubilee year, you don't really have the Sanhedrin. So they kind of go hand in hand, but that's not a condition. Technically, the condition for accepting a Ger Toshav is that we have the Jubilee year in effect, and the condition to have the Jubilee year is that we have to have all the Jews residing in Israel.
Okay.
So A equals B equals C. But the Sanhedrin is not really part of that equation directly.
Okay.
For example, let me mention something which is controversial, and I don't even know if you're aware of it. It happened back in the about 1920s or so, and then again about 20, 30 years ago. And that is a group of rabbis wanted to reinstate or to start again the Sanhedrin.
Mm-hmm.
And technically speaking, why can't they? You don't really need to have the Holy Temple in order to have the Sanhedrin. You don't really need to have all the Jews residing in Israel to have the temple and to have the Sanhedrin. And you don't have to have, so what do you need? And you don't really need to have Mashiach in order to have the Sanhedrin. So if you follow all of the rules, there really doesn't seem to be a reason why you can't. So they tried to. And when they did it the first time, small group, This was internal religious politics, so to say, in the Jewish world. It didn't really get too far at all. And the real authoritative rabbis of the time completely nixed it, and it really didn't get anywhere. And basically the same thing happened when it happened more recently. But more recently, part of the fact that we have communication like we didn't back then, so it was a little bit more, I don't want to use the word successful, but a little bit more solidified in a sense. And I think even to this day, you don't hear much about it, even in the Jewish world. They're not really very active, or at least not openly active. But there's certain things that they wanted to do. One was, they were doing different things. They were involved with Bnei Noach as well. They were involved with, or they are involved. And I don't even know if they convene anymore. I think that the whole thing petered out. Some of them would bring a paschal offering, the Korban Pesach, on the 14th of Nisan. And again, in order to bring the paschal offering, you don't have to have the Holy Temple. But a lot of things that were being done, but it's really not. Basically, the Sanhedrin, even though by Jewish law, theoretically, it could exist, but practically speaking, the Sanhedrin is going to be reinstated with Mashiach, when we have the third and eternal temple, the Beis Hamikdash, and when all the Jews will reside in Israel, and we'll have Mashiach as the king, then we'll have the reinstating of the Sanhedrin.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Anything else?
Yeah, I was just listening to what you were saying. So this Ger Toshav, this practically can't happen right now. No one can be a Ger Toshav, according to what you just said.
According to my mind,
That's an
impossibility.
That's an impossibility. And the Ger Zedek is a convert, so this only leaves one choice for the Noach, and that's the third one. I couldn't pronounce that. I kind of want to get that name again for the third one.
Hasidei Umois Oilam.
Hasidei
Umois
Unmois
Ha-Oilam.
Ma-Oilam.
Ha with an H. Ha-Oilam.
Ha-Olam. Okay, the earth, the world.
Yeah. Now, Hasidei is plural, so for one person, that would be, well, the way we say it, instead of saying it in the singular, is we put the mem in front of it so that it means from, amongst the, and then it can imply singular. So it would be called Me Hasidei Umay Sa'ilam, from the pious of the nations of the world.
Okay, from the pious. Umois means pious. Okay.
Umois is nations. Chassid is pious, and Hasidei is plural, but, well, it's plural possessive. From the pious of, ...
Okay. So that's basically what everybody is going to have to do who is a Noahide. Basically, all of us fall under that category, and the other two categories are really out of reach to us. So our basic concern should be the first category.
1 second. Ger Toshav, for the moment, is not an option, out of reach. You're correct. Ger Tzedek, for anyone who wants to become Jewish, there's that option. However, what is the agenda, so to say, at least from the Jewish perspective, is that no, it's not necessary for you to become Jewish. And what should you be? What kind of a Noahide? Yes, you're correct. Me Chasidei Umeis Olam, from the righteous or from the pious of the nations of the world. Right.
And there's no need for circumcisions or anything like that, just the observance. Now, when we're talking about the observance of the 7 laws, are we specifically speaking about the 7 laws in general, or are we talking about the individual breakdowns of the laws?
breakdowns, all
That's
of
what
their
I'm not
details.
sure of. And I don't know what the breakdown turns into, how many laws or whatever. I was just curious about that.
Many.
Okay.
First, we're going to do the 7, the way Maimonides lists them. And then we can discuss, and again, as I mentioned, there's books out there that go through the details. Let me just give you a couple of general examples that are not part of the 7, and yet they are under the general umbrella group. Somehow they fit in. For example, honoring parents. That's not one of the 7. It's one of the 10 commandments, not one of the 7. And a non-Jew is obligated in that. Another one would be charity, to give charity to a needy person or cause. That's not one of the 7, and yet a Noahide is obligated. Another one would be proper education. So that's another one. So there's general groups like that that are all part of it. So the general idea of the 7 Noahide commandments, before we go into the details or before we even list the 7, the general idea is that to live a moral, ethical, godly life. That's really how I would sum it up.
When I was listening to what you're saying, I spent a lot of years trying to figure out what I, as a Noah, should be doing. You know, when I go to temple, when I get up in the morning, when I go to sleep and go, whatever. And my rabbi, he introduced me to the Shulchan Aruch a while back, and I started reading it, and then I started cherry picking the things that I thought would, I would fit under. And one of them was this obligation towards your parents, of honoring your parents. There's a very lengthy section in there on that, and so I figured that one way to do what I'm supposed to do is to honor my parents. So I've been actually practicing that from that perspective. I mean, even when you're talking about if they're getting senile or going through certain things, it literally tells you how to deal with that family member. Tzedakah is just something that I'm understanding, because there's a kind of a science to it, an understanding that if you help someone else, it covers certain things in your life, and you become a channel for someone else's blessing and those kind of things. So those are kind of natural things that I found just through reading the Shulchan Aruch. And I wonder about little things where I do the Modiani in the morning. I think that's okay for a Noahide to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
that's very, very good. The only question I would have, or objection even, when you say the Shulchan Aruch, so that's the code of Jewish law, as I mentioned earlier, which was written specifically for the Jew. So you're going cherry picking, which is nice, and you're picking the right things so far. But let me give you an example. Let's say it tells you over there about how to keep Shabbos. A non-Jew is not allowed to keep Shabbos.
Right, exactly.
So you need guidance to know what to pick, which cherry to pick, and which to leave.
Well, there's certain things you learn just by osmosis, by being in the community. And one of the things that I've learned over the years from being around the Hasidim is that there's certain things that I'm just not allowed to do. And those things, they may be illustrated in the Shulchan Aruch for the Jew, but as a non-Jew, I think that other Jews have told me, okay, well, you're not allowed to observe the Sabbath as we are, to flick on a light switch, do something like that, So I know that there are certain things, because I know it breaks down into some things that cover women, they cover people who are elderly, people who are, physically, they have issues with the way they can conduct themselves during things. So I know that there's a lot of this stuff is written in there for specifically the people in that community, but at the same time, a lot of it's just practical, but not the really like building a sukkah. You know, I can't build a sukkah, and I shouldn't be building a sukkah.
You could.
I can help build one.
Which part can you not do?
I can't build it on my own. I can't, you know, I can help a Jewish person build one, you know, with a rabbi's.
Can you make the walls of the sukkah all on your own?
I don't know. I don't think so.
The only part you can't do as a non-Jew is put on the schach, the natural grown cover, the roof, which is made out of something which grows in the ground and has been detached, such as bamboo rods or evergreen or whatever. That's the part that the Jew has to put on.
Well, see, when I was working with the rabbi to do that, that's exactly how it went. You know, he literally said, okay, I'm going to put this up here because I think there's something in the law that says you can't do this. But this is getting instruction firsthand. And I mean, I've been like, right. I've been like that for like 35 years now, getting firsthand instruction. So it's just kind of interesting that when we're talking about this, I'm learning that maybe I'm doing something right here. And that's pretty much all I got with that.
Good.
Yeah,
Not everyone has the luxury of having a built-in or a live-in rabbi as their guide. You're very fortunate. Has it been the same rabbi all these 35 years? Wow. May I ask
Rabbi Binyamin Shimon.
Binyamin Shimon?
Yes.
Oh, you're local. You're right here.
Yes.
Oh, I know Binyamin Shimon. I remember when he first came to Chicago. I worked for him in Gan Israel Day Camp in the summer of 1980. Oh, he's a great guy.
Actually, I just talked to him a half an hour ago. So this lets you know how long our relationship has been going on. But, you know, this is the first involvement I've had with this particular medium with you guys. I'm actually the founder of the Noahide community of Chicago out on the South Side.
Wow, that's impressive.
Well, Rabbi Shimon and a couple of the people at Base Menachem decided that we should do this. So beautiful. That's what happened.
Excellent. That's very impressive. Keep up the good work.
For sure.
Wow. Beautiful. So you're very, very advanced, and now you're going to be learning it inside, you know. It's like sort of, I would compare it to a child who was brought up in a proper observant home, and he just knows what to do and what not to do because of his education or upbringing. But then he gets to a certain point in his academic level where he actually opens up the books and learns it inside. So now you're learning about the things that you're doing right. Very good.
Rabbi,
I'm learning that and why. Right. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I wanted to follow up on what Aaron was talking about. In I guess it's chapter 11 here, it says, anyone who accepts upon himself the fulfillment of these 7 mitzvot and is precise in their observance. This is from Chabad. What does that mean? What does that mean, precise in their observance? Because I mean, I never really knew about only the 3 laws, you know.
Okay, as I kind of mentioned before I started reading inside, and perhaps I didn't stress it or it wasn't clear enough. Any translation is by definition automatically at a disadvantage of anything. I mean, doesn't even have to, not even Torah. If someone is translating an article or a book from any language, whatever it may be, you can never do justice. That's just the way it is. You might end up writing a better book than the other guy, but that's not sticking to the you're not being completely loyal to what the person wrote. So let's say someone wrote something in Greek. I don't know, just something in Greek about some Greek sport, and they're right, and you translate it. It has to be that you lose something in the translation. So the best translation is just that, at best, just the translation. So the word here that you're seemingly groping with is, what was it, scrupulous, it says?
Precise in their
Precise.
observance.
Okay, that's not really, if you want to be precise, what it says. It says v'nizhar, and that would more accurately, and again, I'm not saying that they should have translated it differently, because you have to take it into context as well, and you have to have the liberty of, it sounds, sometimes if you want to have a laugh, if you know a few languages, put into Google Translate something and see how they translate it, and sometimes it comes out so awkward and so funny, because it's translating it literally or based on the root of the word, which is completely off. So the word here is v'nizhar, which means that the individual is careful. That's all it means.
Okay, that makes
So the reading would be, anyone who accepts upon themselves the 7 commandments and is careful to do them.
okay.
That sound any better?
That actually, yeah. Yeah, because I was after talking, after everyone was talking about, not knowing exactly what to do all the time, that kind of confused me, because how can we be precise if we don't really know exactly what we can and cannot do? So I like the, careful, I think is
That, and that's a more accurate translation of the word. V'nizhar, and is careful.
Thank you.
So that's in general, whenever you're going to deal with, and the same thing is if you're using an English siddur. The prayer book, when it's translated into English, there's only, so much that they can, besides the fact that when you're dealing with Torah, there's so many levels. So a simple prayer, whether it's a quote from a verse of Psalms or whether it's a blessing that was made up 2,000 years ago, it has so many deep interpretations and deep meanings. So when I say it in the original, whether I'm thinking of the literal translation or 1 or 2 deeper ideas, or my mind is drifting off and I'm not thinking anything, unfortunately, connected to that, the words are beyond powerful. Whereas when you translate it, you're limited to that particular translation that the translator chose, even if it's the best choice, but it's limited and it's only that, not all the other hundreds of deep meanings that the word carries with it. It's just the way it is. There was actually a whole controversy about 40 years ago as far as translating God's name, which sometimes it uses one name in our prayers, then another name. So when translating it to English, when do we say God and when do we say Lord? According to the English language of the Jewish faith, according to stay loyal to our belief in our religion and to the English language, which name in Hebrew is translated as which word? So it became very controversial amongst some great Chabad minds, very great rabbis in Chabad.
Which is why you said that it would be beneficial for everybody, for us to learn Hebrew.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't see any problem with anybody learning Hebrew, even if we're going to say that you're not allowed to learn Torah. I don't think this is a problem to learn Hebrew. I'm not saying everyone would agree with me, but that's my understanding.
Thank you.
All right. I guess we'll wrap it up for today, and we'll try to start on time next week. We're very technologically savvy over here, and we have a whole crew of, just kidding. Anyway, so wishing everybody all the best and much success, and Mashiach now.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Sure, be well.
Good night.
Good night.